Hello, everyone. My name is Reza Rahman. I'm Principal Program Manager for Java on Azure at Microsoft. And what that means is I work with a whole bunch of teams here at Microsoft, sometimes up to 10 or 15 teams, believe it or not, that all do bits and pieces of Java here and there. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is Enterprise Java, namely how to accelerate your Enterprise Java workloads onto Azure. What that means is I'm going to do a really quick tour of all of the things that we do to make enterprise Java developers' life easy, namely folks that are using Java EE or Jakarta EE or microprofile, and what we are doing in order to make it very simple for them to move to Azure in the quickest way possible. All right, so I hope this is going to be fun. So let's go ahead and get started. So here's my plan for your time investment. We have about roughly half hour together. So I'm going to be talking about three different segments of things. We'll be talking a little bit about the Jakarta EE or Java EE ecosystem context. I think that's important for you to understand what that perspective is from a Microsoft standpoint. A lot of the talk then will be focused on talking about what the current capabilities and work that is going on around Jakarta EE or Java EE on Azure. And then finally, we'll be spending a little bit of time talking about the roadmap and what is coming in the near future and perhaps slightly distant future as well. Okay, so let's get started with the ecosystem. So as you all probably know, Java EE or Jakarta EE is a very important part of the Java ecosystem on the cloud. If you look at the rough numbers historically, between a quarter to a third of all workloads are run on some kind of Java EE application server, whether that's WebLogic, WebSphere, WebSphere Liberty, JBoss EAP, WildFly, or Payara. And basically, we target all of these platforms from an Azure standpoint. Of course, you probably also know that even if you are not using a Jakarta EE application server today, you're still dependent on Jakarta EE as a technology in one way or the other. So close to 70 to 80% of workloads, almost all workloads really on Azure, depend on at least one or more Java EE API in some shape or form. So whether you're using Tomcat or Hibernate or ActiveMQ or Jetty or Jersey or Quarkus or Microprofile or any number of these such things, ultimately you depend on Java EE as a platform. And we do have some bindings that are not specific to Java EE application servers per se, but rather specifically targeted to Java EE as an individual API. And we'll talk about that in a moment also. Now, a lot of these applications are moving to the cloud for one reason or the other. I think it's fair to say that these Jakarta EE workloads are a bit more behind the rest of the Java platform in general, but a lot of them are also gradually moving to the cloud as well right now as we speak. So here's some data if you want to take a look at it. One interesting survey to look at that we always do is the Jakarta EE official Jakarta EE development survey. So some of the things I'm talking to you in this context is around that. As you can see, Jakarta EE is an ecosystem. There's a whole bunch of things that evolve around it. But there's also interesting parts of the ecosystem that are arising now, namely things like Quarkus and microprofile that I'll also talk a bit about. We're not doing anything with that quite directly as of yet, but we may in the future. So this is a little bit about the Jakarta EE transition. Again, for context setting, if you're not aware of this, so Java, the technology that we're talking about today and the term that I'll be referring to going forward is Jakarta EE. But Jakarta EE is really nothing much more than a rebranding of Java EE as a technology. As you know, it's been around forever. It's almost 20, 25 years now. Namespace transition and the open sourcing of Java EE happened under the Eclipse Foundation and Jakarta E8. Then we've now had, actually very recently, a namespace transition from the JAVAX namespace to the Jakarta namespace under Jakarta EE 9.0 and 9.1. And finally, we are talking about innovations and new feature updates in Jakarta E10, hopefully later this year or early next year. And the roadmap for that is being worked out also. We always take a look at all of these things and see how our roadmap maps to all of these changes that are happening in the ecosystem. So if you look, as we talked about, the ecosystem is evolving. As you have seen in the previous slide, Java EE or Jakarta EE isn't a stagnant thing. It's always evolving and it continues to evolve. The direction that things are evolving right now is in the Jakarta EE and microprofile direction, along with these more newer, net new cloud native runtimes like Quarkus and Helidon. So there's quite a bit of, at least in early adoption, as you can see in the InfoQ analysis here, they put it in the early adopter bucket. That's just about right from an Azure standpoint also. So we are taking a look at things like Quarkus and Helidon. They're not reflected yet in our product roadmap, but it will very likely will be in the near future. So having talked about the ecosystem, let's now talk about what the current state is that builds upon that ecosystem. So this particular slide, I think of it as a roadmap for this particular segment, if you will. These are the various pathways that you can take as a Jakarta EE developer onto Azure. So there's virtual machines, there's containers, there's managed services. And for each of these, you can choose your own runtime, whatever your runtime happens to be. The significant ones, as we talked about today, is things like JBoss EAP, WildFly, WebLogic, WebSphere, as well as Payara. Payara, we don't address very directly in our product roadmap. We do have some work that we've done with Payara. But the reason we actually don't focus on Payara is that the Payara folks have done a remarkable job to do that on their end. Although I won't be talking about Payara, there's very strong support for Payara on the Azure platform, thanks to the Payara folks themselves. And we'll also talk about managed services. In particular, there's a very interesting offering that you should consider, namely JBoss EAP and App Service. And we'll also talk about some interesting work that is going on around the Azure Service Bus. That's our roadmap. We're going to spend a little bit of time discussing the different elements of this roadmap, and then before we move into more forward-looking things. So virtual machines. Virtual machines are a very old and mature technology. You can think of it as basically running literally the old little meme, if you will, your computer on somebody else's data center. Well, the data center in this case is Azure. So this is what we find is a lot of customers are still interested in virtual machines. It's a very easy way of getting into the cloud, as I alluded to in just a moment. And a lot of our business is actually around virtual machines. And in fact, it's fair to say that the entire Java on Azure, and in fact, Jakarta EE on Azure effort is enabled by the fact that Azure virtual machines don't just mean Windows anymore, and hasn't meant that for a while. In fact, we support all manners of Linux runtimes, and in fact, Linux runtimes are just about to overtake the Windows workloads that we have on Azure. However, though, the interesting thing to understand is when you are talking about virtual machines on the cloud, you need not limit yourself to simply getting an operating system and doing everything by yourself from there. In fact, there are two levels of abstraction that we provide over that, above and beyond what you would get on your on-premise data centers. One is the concept of base images. So instead of just starting from the operating system, let's say you want to target WebLogic, well, you can just get a WebLogic virtual image right from the start. And that comes pre-built from the vendor with lower level details like the operating system and the Java install and the WebLogic install. Above and beyond that is the concept of solution templates, and you have a screenshot of that concept explained. And what this is that it's a one layer above abstraction where you say, I want an instance of WebLogic with the admin console enabled, or I want a cluster of WebLogic servers with the workers and the manager nodes all configured for me. I want, while you're at it, please configure a load balancer for me, or configure a database for me, or configure Active Directory for me, and so on. So it's this UI-based experience that's in the Azure Marketplace. You fill that out, and basically what you get is, lo and behold, magically you have a pretty robust working instance of that setup that you specified in the Azure Marketplace. So we have these marketplace solution templates for all of the major application servers. A very robust offering is the one for WebLogic, okay, as I alluded to, and it comes with all these capabilities of solving all of the common use cases, plus working on all of those integrations as well. So whether it's Azure App Gateway as a load balancer, or Azure SQL or PostgreSQL as a database, or wanting to connect to Oracle DB either on the Oracle Cloud or on Azure, all of those things are built in and baked into this fairly robust solution template. A lot of the mature releases for this has actually happened, and there's going to be ongoing maintenance releases. So definitely you can take a look at that. For each of these slide decks here, I will have a go-to-action link for you. So there's a go-to-action link for WebLogic on Azure. This slide deck will be available to you. You can go and explore each of these links and just simply click on it, and you'll go to the appropriate link for that particular offer. We are also in partnership with IBM. So the Oracle solution is developed in partnership with Oracle. The WebSphere traditional solution is built in partnership with IBM. So we have a very similar set of capabilities on the way now. In fact, it will be announced at build in the build timeframe, and that is WebSphere traditional on virtual machines and a cluster offer. So again, it's the same sort of situation where you want a single instance or a fully functional, highly available WebSphere cluster running on Azure with virtual machines. You simply fill out the marketplace solution template, and lo and behold, you'll have your working setup. And again, we are working with IBM to enable all of those integrations as well. Right. So again, we talked about all those sensible integrations: database, load balancer, directory server, logging via Elk, and so on and so forth. This product will evolve the rest of this year. We'll have the initial release and build, but we won't stop there. And we also have very similar capabilities around the more cloud-native runtimes from IBM, if you will. So that is WebSphere and OpenLiberty, and we're targeting container platforms for that, which is AKS and ARO in Azure. And again, you have your call to action link there. So containers are definitely extremely popular with Java EE and Jakarta EE developers. Probably the highest amount of interest going forward is in the containers domain. And of course, Azure has an extremely robust container offering, one of the premier tier AKS implementations, rather Kubernetes implementations, namely Azure Kubernetes Service or AKS. And we have other services built around that. So things like Azure Container Registry. If you were to use a private registry that's very closely integrated with AKS, that's the one you would use on Azure. And also worth mentioning, if you don't want to use Kubernetes and you simply want to containerize using Docker, a very good option for you is App Service for containers, and that allows you to just Dockerize your application. Let's say you have just a single instance of your application or multiple instances of your application, and you don't need complex orchestration around that. For those use cases, App Service for containers is very, very useful. And again, we are working with the application servers to make sure those application servers run extremely well, and you know what to do, how to make it work on things like AKS. So in general, from an app server standpoint, the app server provider would give you their official Docker images as well as their Kubernetes operators in many cases, or if not in most cases. And what we do is basically provide best practices of how you go about doing that. And we're also looking to build marketplace solution templates where, just like you can do the sort of wizard-based generation experience in the marketplace entry, we're looking to do the same thing for things like AKS. So you can say, here's my ER file or WAR file. I want OpenLiberty, and I want an OpenLiberty cluster of let's say 4 instances, and I want that running on AKS with the Azure Container Registry working, and you can specify all that in the marketplace, and we'll simply generate the starter setup for you, and then let you modify the environment as you wish going forward. And by the way, that's also true of virtual machines as well. Okay, so along these lines, we have a recent offering that we just announced for WebLogic on AKS. And again, this has to do with giving you, at the very beginning, certifying that the WebLogic operator and all of the WebLogic artifacts work well on AKS, as well as giving you some guidance and scripts on how to go about doing this sort of setup. It is non-trivial, so the guidance is definitely helpful. And then going forward, the rest of this year, we'll be looking to create marketplace solution templates around WebLogic and AKS to simplify the experience even further. And again, you can find more information with the aka.ms link that I posted. Same story for WebSphere Liberty on AKS. In fact, we have, just like we have for WebLogic, we also have for WebSphere and OpenLiberty on AKS, we have the guidance, the step-by-step guidance and best practices already documented for you. We've already certified that all of the artifacts work well, including the key piece there is a Liberty operator. And again, we're looking to support all kinds of robust deployments with all kinds of Azure integrations and have a marketplace solution template for that as well. So one layer above Kubernetes is OpenShift, the so-called multi-cloud platform. What this does is that it gives you a higher level facade over your environment, right? So your Kubernetes deployment could be running on different clouds, or it could be running part of it in Azure and part of it on your own on-premise data center. But as long as you're using OpenShift, you basically have a uniform interface to deal with all of those deployments. Your console looks exactly the same, your CLI looks exactly the same, and so on. So there are a number of customers that are interested in OpenShift, and we have a very old, mature offering right now that is a managed OpenShift instance. It's called Azure Red Hat OpenShift. It's a managed OpenShift environment. So again, we are making sure that all of the key runtimes namely JBoss EAP, WebSphere Liberty, and Open Liberty work extremely well on OpenShift, and you have the guidance to do all of that and potentially marketplace solution templates. Again, we've done that. Guidance is available for WebSphere Liberty and Open Liberty on ARO. We'll have Azure Marketplace solution templates shortly for that as well. And you can create all kinds of production-ready deployments already with OpenShift or and WebSphere Liberty or Open Liberty. So finally, we should definitely talk about something very, very interesting and exciting and fairly unique in terms of the top-tier public cloud vendors. And that is a managed, fully managed Java EE App Server offering, in this case, JBoss EAP, on the App Service platform. So what this allows you to do is that it's the highest level of abstraction possible. So all you really say here is that I want a set of JBoss EAP instances. Just create that for me. I don't have to worry about whether it's virtual machines or containers. I don't care. Just give me the setup and let me deploy my artifacts, my year and war file, and that's all you need to be concerned about. And that is the power of App Service. So we do have the JBoss EAP offering for App Service in public preview. It will go shortly GA, probably in the next few months or so. It is jointly developed and supported and operated by Red Hat and Microsoft, like you've seen so far. Pretty much everything we do do through a partnership. It is a stateless but load balanced service for JBoss EAP and App Service. All of the App Service capabilities are load balanced from stateless, so this is really no different than that. You can do automatic deployments through various means that App Service provides. It is auto-scaled for you and monitored for you, in addition to a number of integrations that's built into the App Service platform. You can configure your environment. You would typically do that through the JBoss CLI. That is what App Service will allow you to do. And hopefully there will be an even more robust offering in the future that perhaps would allow you to do stateful applications rather than stateless applications. A public preview is a great time to evaluate things and to get engaged with the team. In fact, for all of these things, you can get engaged with the team that is developing this particular solution. I'll talk to you about that towards the end of our presentation today in a moment. But there's your call to action URL if you want to find out more about JBoss EAP on App Service. So another very interesting thing that we're doing is creating these Java EE API bindings for various key Azure services. And one of those key ones and a key interesting combination is Azure Service Bus and JMS. So now we actually have in public preview JMS2 support for Azure Service Bus. So you can connect to Azure Service Bus using the JMS API that you're already familiar with. And of course, this is in addition to the existing integrations that are there in Service Bus, including through AMQP, the Azure specific Java client libraries, or even bindings through Azure Functions. Want to find out more details about this? Please follow the link. One of the key things to understand here is that all of this is actually enabled through Azure Service Bus with AMQP and Cupid. Okay, Cupid is an Apache open source project, but definitely feel free to take a look at the details of that. Again, this will go GA fairly soon. Right, and there's a number of customers that are already using this, and you would definitely be very welcome to engage with us and be a public preview customer for JMS support in Azure Service Bus. About wraps up what the current state is. We'll talk in a moment a little bit about what the future may bring. But in the meanwhile, I won't have time to do a demo in this very short talk that we have today, but hopefully I'm going to give you something a little bit better. So what I have is actually on my own personal GitHub account, I have an end-to-end example of a typical Java EE application running on Azure. And the objective here is to give you something that you can take a look at by yourself and go through step by step and set up a demo by yourself. I think it's probably even more interesting than me simply doing a demo that you cannot repeat easily. This way you can go ahead and create the demo from scratch by yourself. And by the way, you can do this using a Azure free account if you don't happen to be an Azure customer today. So you don't have to pay anything just to try this out. You get a free Azure account for about a year. So let's talk a little bit about the roadmap. So just as I started with a map, if you will, of my talk, so I will provide another map for this segment of our talk today. And this one, I will annotate my map a little bit. So talked a little bit about all of the offerings that we have already. So the ones that are in the checkered flag, I consider we've made some pretty strong progress. So that is things like supporting WebLogic and WebSphere traditional on virtual machines, WebLogic and WebSphere Liberty and Open Liberty on AKS, WebSphere Liberty and Open Liberty on ARO, JBoss EAP on App Service, the JMS support for Service Bus. I think those are all in pretty decent shape, and we've been working toward this for a while now. So it is definitely ought to be in very decent shape. There are certain other things that are that were made strong progress on, and will continue to make strong progress on. So these are things like JBoss EAP on virtual machines, WildFly on virtual machines, JBoss EAP on ARO, and JBoss perhaps WildFly on AKS. And there's some areas where we sort of are depending on you to figure this stuff out on your own. There's really nothing stopping you. In the end, we are an infrastructure provider. All that we're talking about is how do we make that infrastructure transition for you as easy as possible. So the JBoss EAP and on AKS story is sort of one of those where you can do it, but you'll have to do it in more of a DIY, do it yourself way, as opposed to having concrete guidance and concrete tooling and concrete best practices from Microsoft and the respective partner. Okay, so we're in pretty good shape for the WebLogic and virtual machines roadmap. So we talked about this already, the basic capabilities of clustering and single instance and all of the integrations built in. That's already in mature shape. We'll be doing some maintenance releases for it going forward. But we're also looking to see how we can create simple migration tooling, even simpler migration tooling to, for example, say that you have an on-premise installation and you run some kind of static environment analysis that will allow you to have a point and click migration to Azure, at least to start. So that is the objective there. Similar story with WebLogic on AKS. So we've enabled through guidance and soon through a marketplace solution template, and in the next few months, the simple use cases of setting up a cluster on AKS or WebLogic, maybe doing some file-based persistence with Azure files, and then we'll work as time progresses along the lines of having a capability that's very similar to what we have for virtual machines today, and that is all the rest of these integrations, including perhaps down the line some migration tooling for this pathway as well. So I did want to talk a little bit about the WebSphere product family on Azure holistically. So this is a good graphic to represent that. So as we talked about, we'll soon have the release for WebSphere traditional on virtual machines. We also have guidance for running WebSphere Liberty and Open Liberty on either AKS and ARO. We will be having a marketplace solution template for those things as well, just like we have a marketplace solution template for WebSphere traditional on VMs. We are also looking to enable the transformation advisor piece from IBM into the Azure marketplace as well. And that is a tool that you can run that tells you what do you need to do in order to move from either an on-premise or maybe even on Azure WebSphere traditional setup to a setup that is based on containerization and either Open Liberty or WebSphere Liberty. And again, we are looking to not just do those simple use cases, but also figure out how do we best enable integration points, whether it's database or Active Directory or distributed logging on containers using Elk. One of the pieces that I'm going to talk to you as a roadmap item is JBoss EAP and WildFly on virtual machines. We do have quite a few customers, again, still pursuing the virtual machines pathway. So over here, what we have today is a set of what we call quick start templates. These are community quick start templates. You can use them. Instead of using a UI, they use a command line based interface using ARM templates to do similar kind of things, to have a simple deployment of JBoss EAP cluster or a WildFly cluster. We are looking to graduate these quick start templates into marketplace solution templates. So they would have Red Hat branding, and you would be able to point and click to a UI and be able to create that setup. If you want to find out about what is going on, at least in the quick starts, there is a call to action link there as well. So you can feel free to take a look at that. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our quick tour of all things Jakarta EE on Azure. So as you can see, the main thing that if you take away one thing today, it is that we are working on this, and there's a dedicated team and a dedicated person, aka me, that is committed to making you successful in your journey for Jakarta EE on Azure. And there's a number of different options for you already. You're already in pretty good shape. You don't have to do DIY. We're giving you all the tools and the guidance you need to be successful in your chosen path. We have all these toolings around containers and virtual machines for all the major app servers. We have an industry-leading PaaS offering for Java EE developers, namely JBoss EAP on App Service. That's going to be more robust going forward. And of course, we're looking to improve all the time. We're looking to work with you, right? Let me repeat that again. We're looking to work with you to improve all of these pathways and make sure we have the right things to make your life easier. And the way you do that is you help us help you, right? And a simple way to do that is filling out the survey. So there's a survey link posted on the slide. If you want to engage with us, want to work one-on-one with us on your migration case, it is completely free of charge to do that. All you need to do is fill out the survey and we will be in touch with you and we can begin collaborating. So for all of the things that I talked about, during the scope of this talk, there is actually a product announcement around that. So these are all of the product announcements listed in the resources section. For each of the product announcements, there will be other resources that you can go to. So the specific offering or a video or a getting started guide or whatever else you need, it's all a good place to get started are these product announcements. And that's what I have listed for you as a resource. Well, that was our tour of all things Java EE and Jakarta EE and microprofile on Azure. I know it was a very fast-paced tour. At least I'm having trouble breathing. I'm barely catching my breath right about now. So I do hope you got an idea of all of the things that we do on your behalf. And do take a look at all of the CTA links that are embedded in the slide deck. The slide deck will definitely be available to you. But the thought that I'd like to leave you with is basically help us help you. Right, and the way you do that is you engage with us and you work with us and to make sure that we're working on all the right stuff. And the way you do that is just you go ahead and fill out the survey link that I shared at the very end of the slide deck. If you take away one thing out of our talk today, please let that be the thing. At any rate, really enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it also. Really appreciate your time and maybe see you around some other time.